welcome to the podcast. Today we've got Adam Pennin. Adam, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on again, Dom.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And thanks for coming on in this obviously weird time. How's it been for you in this lockdown?
Well, it's been all right actually. It's been lots of family time, and I mean, I totally get it. You know, some families or relationships might be fractious, or you might have 4 kids and you're in a 2-bed flat, and you know, we're all right. We're just a family of 3, me, my wife, and my 5-year-old son, and we've got a small sort of end of terrace house with a little garden. Nothing. It's always easier, I think, for these celebrities to go, oh yeah, staying at home's brilliant when they've got a pool and a pool table and everything else. But no, I think it's been all right for us because there are no rules about that say that you can't. Obviously, they say you can go out and exercise. So we've been taking full advantage of that. So every afternoon we go out. We'll do a cycle ride together, and then we'll go and play tennis or football in a park, obviously keeping all the social distancing in mind and not compromising ourselves or anybody else. So it's been, I think, since the lockdown started, it hasn't rained. So we got caught in a sleet and hailstorm one afternoon out on the bikes. But other than that, we stopped under a railway bridge. But that was the closest we came to anyone else because about 10 other people stopped under the bridge. But there was loads of room, so it wasn't a drama. But it's been, you know, reasonably warm. It's been dry. So the mornings are spent doing family games, and we were homeschooling. But with it being Easter week, we thought it's only fair to let him have his week off for Easter. And we're back on homeschooling next week. So it's this week it's been no homeschooling. It's just been family games, Monopoly, what have you, and then a good proper double session of exercise using the videos on the internet, and then out in the afternoon on our bikes and with our tennis rackets. So to answer your question, it's actually been all right. You know, I think, like I said, there will be certain people in certain circumstances that are finding it inordinately tough because maybe the family isn't getting along or it's a small environment. But generally speaking, you know, if you're just told to stay at home and watch telly and chill out, I mean, there's a lot worse things going on, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. How's the homeschooling going?
Yeah, well, it's been good actually because my wife structured it really, really well for River, and it's been sort of do your whatever assignment we've set to him, which, you know, could be anything from cursive writing to mathematics. And then when that's completed, that section, he then earns a bit of iPad time or lightsabers in the garden or whatever he wants to do. And then, you know, so it's do a bit, earn a bit, and then revert. And it's been working really well. What about you? Because obviously you've been doing that as well, haven't you?
Well, it's I'm at mine, Emma and the boys are at hers, because the original plan, obviously pre-lockdown, I was still going to work, obviously, because I've got a heating business.
Yeah.
So I was still in and out of people's houses. And the view was Emma and the boys were going to self-isolate because they wanted to go and see Emma's dad because he's not well at all. So obviously this was all pre-lockdown. Okay. So the plan was they were going to self-isolate for the 2 weeks and then, you know, go and see her dad, spend a bit of time with him. But obviously that all went out the window with this lockdown. So I'm sort of almost locked in at mine, recording the podcast, dropping supplies off to Emma and the boys when they need them. I'm still doing my one bit of exercise, going for a walk, I think, which is really important.
Definitely.
Just to get a bit of fresh air.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then similar to you, just doing home exercises, not letting it slip. Like I said, I did, I think, 100 squats the other day with the old Ridge Monkey water butt in my hands,
Nice.
like an absolute.
Nice.
But yeah, my legs are only just recovered now, so I thought I'd have another bash at it. But
brilliant. Yeah, that's hardcore. 100 squats. Well, I suppose how hardcore it is depends on what size water container you're using.
Yeah. It was I think it's a 10-litre one.
Oh
so
yeah, that's
kilos,
hardcore. That is hardcore.
Yeah, it's just, and it's an awkward shape to hold as well. You're sort of bear hugging it almost to try and keep it up. So it's almost like front squats rather than it being on your back. So
absolutely, yeah.
Front squats are always harder than the traditional squats anyway, aren't they?
They are indeed. Have you been doing any of the high intensity interval training on the internet?
Not so much. I've rather than I'm trying to do it as compact as possible. So if I do squats, I've got like a tension band thing. So I'll then do maybe like biceps in the rest period.
Right.
So I'm doing that rather than sort of full on high intensity. I mean,
Nice.
have you been doing that, the Joe Wicks stuff or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I started off with Joe Wicks and did that about 6 or 7 days last week. I had one day or 6 days, and then this week it's been all about Natasha Ocean.
Right.
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I'll just watch it because she's got great music that she plays in the background. That's what I tell my wife anyway. Yeah, if you haven't seen Natasha Ocean's workouts, then check those out. She's got ways of motivating you. So yeah, but I've been tending to, like, I did 2 sessions with Natasha yesterday, and then one with another guy who was mixing it up generally. And
Yeah.
I think I just in 2 weeks of doing that, so I've done it. So I did it this week. I had Saturday off last week, and I've done it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Today's Friday, and I'll probably do it tomorrow. And then I did the same the previous week with one day off. And it's I'm reasonably fit, but you can see the results in 2 weeks. It's hitting places that I wasn't hitting in the gym because it's a full body workout, and I think, as you just said, the fresh air is important. I think this exercise, whatever form of activity you're doing, even if it's just a walk, if you're listening to this, I know that they're banging, stay at home. If you can go out and get fresh air and not come into contact with anyone, then bloody do it.
Yeah, important for the mental health side of things
hugely,
as well, isn't it?
Hugely. Yeah, massively.
Yeah. Obviously, fishing's a bit irrelevant and on the back burner at the minute, but everyone loves a nice sort of capture story. Have you got any that you can chat about, Adam?
God, don't you hate it when you hear people ask that question and they go, "Oh man, that's such a tough question. There's so many." Oh, piss off, right? Okay, we know you're good, mate. All right, you don't need to bang on about it. No, it's a lot easier for me because I haven't caught that many. I'd say probably there's a fish that I wrote about extensively in Rolling in the Deep, which was the culmination of a really, really long campaign, which involved long journeys from home. The distance from home to the lake was 100 miles, so 200, just under 100 miles, 95, I think. And so it was a nearly 200-mile round trip. And it was when I started the campaign for this particular fish, I was living quite close to the lake, and then I changed jobs and had to relocate halfway across the country. And don't like unfinished business, so it just meant that I had to grit my teeth and carry on going on with it. And it would be quite regularly a Wednesday night trip to bait up 200 miles, and then get back there on the Friday night and fish till Sunday lunchtime. And it was quite a small lake. I mean, as you all know, the smaller lakes are invariably the toughest because the fish just know what's going on, and they're so hyper aware of human activity, aren't they? But it was a very, very low stock lake, 10 fish in there, and over a period of a couple of years, I'd managed to catch all of them except this one that I was after, which was, I'd had a picture, I'd photographed it actually for a mate 3 years earlier, and it gone £36, which isn't, these days a lot of people would probably say, well, that's an awful lot of effort for a fish of that size. But the fish is really long, not on the radar, almost completely unknown at the time by anyone other than a small circle of friends, and still is largely. And it was a unique fish, and the more I watched it, the more I became obsessed with it. And the fish in this intervening time that was inordinately long because of my inability to catch the fish during this time, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So when that day came on the 7th of April, actually, just checking my phone, almost, so that was 2006, 7th of April 2000, so nearing the anniversary of that. So that was a trip I got down. I'd been spreading some boilies down the spine of the lake because it was early in the year. It was very cold. Wasn't putting in loads, but the fish each spring tended to wake up in this central zone down the middle. So I used to pump up a small inflatable and just drift on the wind down the spine of the lake, putting a handful over the side of the boat, either side as I went, and I knew that as I covered a stretch of maybe 120 yards, I knew I would be putting bait near fish. And this wasn't the tactic for the whole campaign. This is just what I was doing this particular spring, when everything was waking up. And I'd seen a couple show, and I'd caught a 20-pound common, which was a very, very rare visitor to the bank. Well, they all were actually, but the morning of April the 7th, it was I think it was a Friday. I'd taken the Thursday off work because I wanted to get down for a long weekend, and got down there. And I remember the cast. I put two where I'd caught a couple of tench and this 20-pound common. Put two rods there and catapulted a couple of boilies over them, probably a dozen baits or so. And then the other one, I decided to fish as a single down to the left where I'd seen a fish show about 2 weeks before. And I cast it out, and the lake did get very, very weedy, but this time of year there was hardly any. As long as you got a drop, you were fishing. And I remember this particular cast. It was just I can remember the actual cast and what the rig looked like going through the air that evening on that Thursday night, and I got the most incredible crackdown, just immense. So I left it there, and the next morning, as I woke up after another blank, which were very, very common on there over 2.5 years, chasing such a small number of fish, you can imagine. And the next morning I was sat on my bed chair. It was cold, bleak, 7th of April, there weren't any leaves. There hadn't been any warmth. I think the previous week, actually, there had been some light snow. And, it was just, the water was freezing, probably not quite in double figures. And I sat there on my bed chair after a blank night, another blank night, nothing new. And you sit there and you're trying to plan the day and the weekend ahead, what you're going to do. Are you going to move? I'd been up since first light in case anything showed. Nothing showed. And you're contemplating this and writing a few notes in your diary, and all of a sudden it happened. That left-hand rod with the single bait, just the most ridiculous bite. You just, when you're playing a fish on a lake with such a low stock, and the fishing is so hard, whenever you hook one, you can't quite believe it's happening. And the fight was ridiculous. Good 40 minutes on my own at the lake, and 25 minutes into the fight, I saw and knew what it was, although I suspected it, because the first run, it took me 120 yards down the lake. And I remember it started kiting in towards this reed bed down to my left, long way down the lake, good, 120 yards down the lake. And I saw my line swinging in towards this reed bed on my own margin, but further down. And I'm side straining as much as I could. I had quite soft rods on, and side straining. And the next thing I knew, I'm looking down towards this reed bed, and I'm side straining this fish. Suddenly, all the coots in this reed bed erupted and bolted, and then the line started swinging back out. And at that moment, I thought, well, the fish hadn't even broken surface, so the birds had all seen this submarine heading towards them and bricked it and bolted, and that was just one of those moments that just gets imprinted in your mind forever. And the fight ended with this huge fish wallowing off the net cord, and it was an unknown and off the radar 40-pound carp, because in the intervening time it had grown to 40 pound 10 ounces, which was my first 40-pounder. And it was a fish which, if you to have a fish as your first 40, this carp was monumental. And it finished the 2.5 years of the mileage, the graft, the literal blood, the literal sweat and tears, and ended with tears, because I just sat in the edge of the lake in my waders, just totally overcome with emotion. And some of my friends drove 100 miles to come and help and share the moment. And that's probably a moment that I'll never ever beat. But you're sat there and you're drenched in euphoria, and you're also drenched in sadness. It's a really weird combination, because that the love affair, the obsession is over, but at the same, so you have that feeling of deep sadness that it's time to leave and move on. But at the same time, you have this incredible high, because you've caught the fish that every minute of every day you would dream about. That winter, I'd been hard into exercise at the gym, and on the treadmills I would run for 10k, and just throughout the run I'd be playing it over and over and over again, what it would be like to catch that fish for months on end. So it had become a complete obsession. And that's sorry, I waffled on a bit there, but that was the one.
Brilliant. Wow, that visualization thing as well, that's quite important in sort of a lot of things in life, isn't it? It's quite a handy thing to be able to do.
Hugely, yeah. A lot of self-motivating experts or motivational experts will tell you that, you know, if you've got a goal, and it can be, as you already know, I know from speaking to you before, whether it's business or relationship or anything, you know, if you've got a goal in mind, it's a big part of achieving that success.
No, definitely. That was a
You're very
story, Adam.
Thank you. You're very goal and objective driven, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. And I think as well, you said obviously about being sort of so focused on achieving it, like even when you moved all that distance away and still kept going at it. I mean, how important as well do you think it is to be flexible with your goals? I mean, because have you ever got to that point where you're almost flogging a dead horse and think, right, well, this isn't working, I need to adapt and overcome?
I think certainly with that carp that I just told you about, it was very clear in my mind that there was only 3 possible outcomes. There was only 3. Either I died, or the carp died, or I caught it. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. They were the only possible outcomes. But in terms of sometimes there was a lake that I fished that was rented through, or not the lake was rented, but the company paid the gamekeepers and the landowner a small retainer to allow me and Terry and Martin Bowler to fish it. And when I left the company, you know, I put in more than 100 nights and just, again, insane effort trying to catch one of these 4 fish that lived in the lake. And at that point, they had never been caught by anybody. And the mission came to an end because I ended up leaving the company and moving on to other things, and there wasn't any way I could go back. So, but in terms of actually drawing a line on it, I suppose the most recent example where I'd have to admit that would probably be last winter. This winter just gone, I got a ticket for Swan Valley, a winter ticket down at Yateley, and fished probably half a dozen sessions or so, and found that all the very, very few fish that did come out in that period of November all came from one peg and one set of snags. So obviously with a lot of local angler, I mean, that for me is well, it's a 2-hour minimum trip to get there, and a lot of local anglers on the case, you know, getting in that swim was nigh on impossible. I didn't actually try and get in it anyway because I hate snag fishing. I find it too stressful, and I tried to persevere to catch them in open water, which didn't work for me. And looking back through the history of the lake and talking to a lot of people there, it had terrible winter form. So I'd broken the golden rule, really, of, you know, you should always generally try and find a lake that's got good winter form. But while I was there, I think 3 or 4 fish came out, and, you know, in that month of November. And the journeys back sometimes stretched up to 4 hours around the M25. And so after a month, I knocked it on the head. So I'm sure some people down that, well, yeah, Swan Valley was too hard for Penny and everything. But, it, you know, when it's required, I'm more than happy to go through the pain barrier, as I did at Raisbury when it was the original Raisbury. And I found that very, very hard. And I just keep going. But sometimes, yeah, you're right. You just have to think, do you know what? Is this a Pyrrhic battle? Is this really worth it? Is it really fitting in with my life? You know, all the travelling, the mileage, for something that may or may not happen. And I think I'm right in saying that the lake continued to fish pretty shy all through the winter. So I'm glad I did knock it on head, went elsewhere, and had bounteous time. So, what's your view on it? Do you think there's times to be flexible and say, do you know what?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't remember. It was a quote that somebody said, something along the lines of that the person that's the most flexible, or the system that's the most flexible wins, pretty much. And it's just, yeah, like you say, it's knowing when you can and when you can't push, because it's just fishing, isn't it? I know there's quite a few people that are fish at all costs, absolutely. But obviously, you're a family man. You have to weigh up the time and the cost of getting to the lake.
Absolutely, definitely.
And the opportunity cost, I suppose, as well, of actually spending all that time there.
Definitely. I mean,
yeah, I think
the situation that I had with that fish that I told you about, that story, that I couldn't do that now, because I couldn't work all week and then go fishing every weekend on my hunt. I couldn't every Wednesday night go and drive 200 miles to bait up, you know. So you're right. You need to be flexible, and you need to be. Carp fishing is very selfish, isn't it? If you're totally absorbed in it, and selfishness and obsession don't really fit in with healthy family lifestyle, do they?
No, very true. You touched briefly on Wraysbury then. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Your days on there?
I'm quite sort of, when I, again, just going back to the book, a large part of that ended up being written on Wraysbury, despite the fact that I didn't catch many fish. And sometimes when I look at it now and I think, wow, so much of this is about something that didn't happen, and yet,
but that's real, isn't it?
It is real, Dom. Exactly. And so many people say to me now that is their favourite part of the book, and and I think it just because it resonates with people, because you know, and it's still something that I get at slideshows or angling shows or social media. A lot of people who are on the outside looking in think that well-known anglers are catching all the time, and it's so far from the truth. You know, completely. I promise you, they're all going through their own barren spells and so on, but they've got the grit, the skills, or the determination, or all three to get through it. So yeah, it happens to everyone. But the whole Wraysbury thing was very. I mean, then it was. This was in the period spanning 2007 to 2012. So a lot of years of fishing on a lake where I was catching very, very little. You know, you might be a fish a year, 2 fish a year, and that's not typical of some of the brilliant anglers on there. People like Tom Anderson, Simon Scott, who just clicked with it and it all fell in place. I found it very, very hard. I mean, I was doing weekends, so you're getting there on Friday night, and you've got 120 acres, and you've got 40 carp, and you would usually, Friday night you would try and find it, but usually you wouldn't be able to. So then it would be about getting up at first light on Saturday, having worked all week, getting up at 5 in the morning, watching the lake, finding some activity, moving on it, and then fishing where they were for 24 hours because you had to go home on Sunday. So it was something that I took on, knowing that it may have been a mountain too tall for me to climb, but I always have this sort of piscatorial masochism that makes me want to put myself through it. And I did catch fish from there, and I proved that I could do it, but it was very hard work. But some of the things you just realise, I mean, I used for a long time. I mean, one of the greatest baits, let me just put this on record, one of the best baits I've ever used is Cell, and some of the best baits I've ever used have been mainline, and I would still advocate them to anybody. But the thing with Wraysbury was that the fish in there had a predilection for rich, dark fish meals. And I had always believed that once a good bait, always a good bait, it will work anywhere. So I was using Cell at Wraysbury for a number of years. And if I did catch one, it would have been on a yellow pop-up or something on the side of the boat. I don't think they ever really ate it with any gusto at all. But I persevered. It was only through a conversation with Ken, who this guy he's one of the sort of the Essex legends, I suppose, and a lot of people won't have heard of him. But Kenny Dorset he's been around as long as carp fishing's been around. And I was chatting to him down the Cons one day. We were feeding some fish in the snags, talking about bait. And he made me aware, or opened my eyes to something I didn't realise, which is that some baits can be very site specific. And he told me that even a bait as phenomenal and as all dominating as Activate didn't really work very well at Horton. I started thinking, and it was only when I switched to a really good fish meal. I mean, this is well ahead of the sticky days. Sticky wasn't even formed and in its current existence back then, because this was about 2000 and, well, like I say, 2007 through to 2012. So I got hold of what I deemed to be the best fish meal on the market, and is still one of the best ones, which is Mark Bryant's Atlantic Heat. Mm-hmm. And you switched over to that and started catching fish, which in my last year, not a lot of fish, but more. And I try not to have regrets, but I wish I could go back in time and fish that whole campaign, 2007 to 2012, on the bait that they wanted to eat. You know, that's, you know, so and it taught me something about favourites, or how fish can have these preferences. So, generally speaking, in my experience, that the weedier and the clearer the lake and the older the fish are, the more likely they're going to have a preference for a rich dark fish meal. And the more highly stocked the lake with younger fish and with less weed, the more likely they're going to have a preference for something sweet, nutty, creamy. It sounds like a bit of a generalisation, but that is something that I have found over the last 20 years or so, I suppose. And it takes me, it reminds me of just doing thinking tackle programs with Simon Scott. We did quite a few together, and obviously, if you're doing a TV program, you need to go somewhere which is going to be fairly lucrative in terms of stock. Generally, we did do a couple on hard lakes like Yateley North Lake, but generally, you go somewhere that's going to be a bit prolific. And throughout that period, Simon was using Atlantic Heat, and I was using Sell. So all of these lakes that we fished, apart from the North Lake, were the sort of lakes that would fall into the category that I just said, that have younger fish, not much weed, slightly murky water. And on all of those lakes, now Simon Scott is a far better angler than I am. When we went to these lakes, I would use Sell, Simon would use his fish meal Atlantic Heat, and every time I would catch more fish. And yet, if we had gone to, I don't know, Christchurch at Lynch Hill, or Raysbury, or any, in inverted commas, proper carp lake with old carp living in weedy, clear environments, Simon would have wiped the floor with me, So bait I'm convinced, can be quite specific. So if anyone's listening to this and they're fishing for big old fish in clear, weedy water, choose a fish meal from a reputable company and get on it, because I really believe that's part of the key. Again, I've proper waffled. What are your thoughts on that, Dom?
Well, that first of all, what you've just said there, I think is going to be gold for a lot of the listeners. That's really relevant. On that point as well, just before I covered, I remember years ago someone saying about them fishing Savay and the fish absolutely not getting caught on corn or liking sweet corn at all. Was that right? Do you remember that story?
I haven't heard that, but what I do know as fact is that Tom Banks and some others, or particularly Tom, the owner, did very, very well at Savay on maize.
Right.
So I don't know, but maybe he did so well on maize that after that they wouldn't touch sweet corn. I don't know.
Yeah, bloody good angler, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I've my water for this year is one of the ones on the Cotswold Pits, and 10 minutes from me. So one of the big sailing lakes.
Nice, very nice.
But that's an interesting mix, because there's obviously the handful of the originals, again, the older, bigger fish, but they've sort of recently, I think November, they put a few younger fish in. I had one on my first session, actually, a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
Before the lockdown.
Nice.
But yeah, in terms that, that makes sense what you said, but I've only ever really sort of used, funnily enough, I use Mark Bryant's bait anyway, so most of my fish have been on the Heat. But obviously he's just about to release that new Cremino, but obviously with this lockdown, I suppose that's all on hold.
Yeah, I almost said to you, when you're getting back out, it's part of our imprint, isn't it? But at the same time, I think I said this to a few people recently. You're old enough to remember what it was like in the 90s. We stopped fishing on the 15th of March, and we didn't start until the 15th of June. And that was it. The fishing was brilliant when we started. The fish had a nice rest. It was great to watch them during the close season and feed them. And obviously, for the last 25 years, we've been treated to being able to fish in the spring, which is the most magical time. But just think of it as the old close season being reimposed. We didn't used to bat an eyelid of it because that was how it was. And this year, this is how it is. So don't get too vexed about not being able to go fishing. We all want to go fishing. I'm sure some people still are quietly, but don't get upset about it. We'll all hopefully be back out doing it by the time the summer unfolds.
Yeah, no, there's going to be one hell of a buzz when everyone gets back out there, just like the old days.
Yeah, we won't be taking even a single night or just a few hours. Nothing will be taken for granted. It will all be. Well, it's like a lot of things in life, that this is changing people's mindsets. It's making people realise how lucky we were with the freedoms we had and the lives that we lived.
I said exactly the same thing, actually, on the previous episode. Just the simple things that you take for granted.
Definitely.
I mean, even I'm sort of keen into my photography. Even just being able to go somewhere with the camera for a few hours.
Yes.
Yeah. And and obviously we're at that stage now where the light levels are increasing. We can hear the birds singing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to do the lakes and just nature. I've said this all already, but it's just going to do nature, the lakes, the fish, everything, isn't it? The environment.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it is the most wonderful time of the year, to quote a Christmas song. But it's very, you've got to just go out in the garden or hear it through your window at dawn. The dawn chorus everything is alive and vibrant. And the weather. I think they're saying from Sunday onwards, or certainly next week, it's getting a lot warmer. 18 degrees, nights in double figures. So just go out in your gardens. Stay at home doesn't mean stay inside. Get your bed chair out of the garage and stretch out and soak up some sun rays. Put some sun cream on. But sunlight is very, very good for you. And getting fresh air and sunlight they're part of nature's drugs to keep you healthy and positive. And we all need to keep health and positive, don't we?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's going to be interesting, I think, as well. Like, I suppose nobody can really predict it. Just the knock-on effects in every aspect, not just business, health. It's everything, isn't it? Nobody can really see how when this clears, and the lockdowns obviously is going to be a gradual process, isn't it? It's just going to slowly lift. There's going to be months before there'll be any proper gatherings. Football matches, festivals. They just announced that Wimbledon was cancelled, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you've got the biggest social experiment in the history of humankind going on right now. It's never been done. So what are the ramifications of that? And some of them could be quite dark, for certain families and certain households and so on who being locked together is probably not in their best interest. I've spent a lot of time fretting about that and worrying about it. And if anyone's listening to this and they think, if you're hearing unusual sounds or anything from your neighbours, then just don't turn a blind ear or blind eye to it, because some people will be finding this really hard. And that's been very much on my mind. And then obviously you've got the other side of how long, with this economic shutdown, and I wasn't going to be dooming and glooming, but let's be realistic. The longer this goes on, the more it's going to affect businesses. And it's already affecting businesses. Businesses will have shut down already. And I said to my wife when this started that when we come out of this, you'll walk down your high street and 2/3 of everything will be gone. It'll be boarded up all over the country, because a lot of businesses cannot sustain being shut a month, let alone the sort of time that we might be looking at. And what does that mean for us?
All the restaurants,
exactly,
retail,
absolutely. A lot of those places are going hand to mouth every month anyway, because of business rates and rent and everything. There's going to be some huge changes when we come out of this. How many tackle shops? Tackle shops were struggling anyway. How many are not going to be there when we come out of this? And what is the knock-on effect of A, having less places to get fishing tackle, and B, families who are suffering unemployment not having money to spend on fishing tackle? Fishing itself is not probably going to be the same for a lot of us. And that's unfortunately the reality. But at the same time, let's be positive. We are living through a landmark in human civilization. We are living through it. where we are part of this. I went, you know, make it count. Stay positive. This is something that, like I say, it's a landmark in human civilization. It doesn't get any bigger. And in some ways, it might sound strange. In some ways, we're almost privileged to be living through this, because this is monumental. So live through it. Stay positive. Make it count. Look after people around you.
Definitely that positive. It's all about that mindset, isn't it? That, like you say, there will be, unfortunately, lots of businesses that will go under, but with that equally brings plenty of opportunity if you look in the right place or you get it right.
Exactly, definitely.
How where are you at the minute work wise? Are you off? Are you furloughed, or are you self-employed, or what are you doing, and how's that affecting you?
So at the moment, the only part of my income which isn't affected that has been affected is the tutorials,
Right.
and that's direct income that's affected. But then there's the slightly less quantifiable area of just being out on the bank fishing and doing the stuff that I do for my sponsors, so, which I can't obviously do. So those two things are mothballed. But in terms of, I've been talking to the guys that I work with through the companies that I work with, Sticky and Pure Fishing, and there is a drive to do more digital media. So whilst some companies might be furloughing salespeople and making cutbacks, if you're a sponsored angler, it's up to you to try and keep yourself relevant and keep yourself valuable by putting out digital content. So starting next Monday, we're going to be doing Facebook Lives and I think maybe Instagram Lives, where I'll be doing videos, short films of, I'm putting a structure together at the moment, but there's never been a better time for people to listen to the sort of superb content that you're putting out. People are at home. Everyone is literally. There's never been a more relevant usage for the term captive audience. So, people, definitely. And it's not mercenary to say that people want to alleviate their boredom. Having said that, guys, boredom is something that is only suffered by boring people. Don't let yourself be a boring person. Time is the greatest and most precious of all commodities in it's arguable, I would say. So, there are so many things you can do. And I think that a few people asked me through the winter about maintaining focus and maintaining motivation for winter fishing. And something that I thought about in great depth. And I realised that some people are just obviously naturally motivated. You either are or you aren't. I've never, probably like you, Dom, I've never met anybody who is highly motivated, but they're a bit of a downbeat, negative person. Have you ever met anyone like that?
No, absolutely not.
Doesn't
they
happen.
Go hand in hand.
No, it's so. What I would say to people is, if you do lack motivation, then you might be lacking positive energy in your life generally. So although some people are just born with that, and it's annoying when I meet him, Simon Scott, he's just bristling with it, and I wish I had more of that. But but if you haven't, then you can bring that into your life just by being. I always say that if you smile at the world will smile back at you, and I apply that to fishing as well. So if you love the lake will love you back, and that's something that reminds me of my raspberry fishing. So one of the reasons I'm sure that I found raspberry so tough was because I hated the planes. Hated them. 100 yards over your head, 5 a.m, jumbo jet, and then it'd be one every minute till 11 o'clock at night. Now, if you talk to any of the really good raspberry anglers, but the planes didn't bother them at all. Simon Scott, they just fade it out and they don't notice it. Whereas every time went over, I'd grit my teeth, I'd look skyward, and then you've got negative energy. And there's no doubt in my mind that negative energy inhibited my carp catching ability almost as much as the wrong choice of bait. And So you can't, every time, and people will probably listen to this thinking, what an idiot. But we live, even here in lockdown, we live very enriched lives. Go to the sink and turn the tap on. What comes out? Clean water. You can drink as much of it as you want. If you're cold tonight, you can put on the heating. Even if you've just got baked beans and bread to eat, you're richer than most people in the world. We're in the top few percent, and just try and look at positive things rather than negative things. And certainly in this climate, it's easy to turn on the news and be filled with doom and gloom and so on. But there is a lot of positive. Look at your family around you. Look at children. Children are the greatest source of joy. I didn't have River until I was in my mid-40s, but I wish I'd known how great they were early. People used to tell me, but I'd be like, yeah, all right, mate, you crack on with yours. I'm going to Ibiza. But now, there's a lot of joy out there, whether it's the birds singing or the sun shining or the water that comes out of your tap. Just try and take positives into you, because the more positive you are, the more positive life will be back to you. I believe that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, a few years ago, I'd have thought, what do you mean negative energy, positive energy? I wouldn't have, bought into it, but you're so right. And it sort of manifests, doesn't it? And it grows what you focus on. That's still you getting to choose. And you see, you have to put a positive spin on everything, really, because there are always positives.
Yeah. It's interesting what you just said then, Dom. Sorry to cut across, but you said you can choose. And that is, you have a choice whether you're going to let something upset you or whether you're going to say, this is not upsetting me, I'm just ignoring it. You're so right. It comes down to your choice. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's just the same, and the same thing with happiness as well. That's a choice as well. And a lot of people see, again, it's a bit of a cliche, but a lot of people see happiness as a destination, but it's not, is it? Because if it's a destination, you're missing out on all those happy, fun times getting there.
Absolutely.
It's all about that journey, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally get it that there will be people listening to this who have got a relative with cancer, or someone's had a road accident. I get that. My sister's got a brain tumor. We all have to live with our burdens. So I don't want people to listen to this and think, oh, Penning's all right. Look how he loves his life. Everything's perfect in his life. Well, it's not. No one's got a perfect life, but you can choose how much that's going to affect you. And that doesn't mean, obviously, I don't take things seriously, like my sister's illness. I do. But you don't have to. You have control over how much you let things drag you down.
Yeah, no, definitely. You mentioned about losing your dad, don't you, in the book as well?
Yeah, very much.
Weirdly, obviously, you. I think you last came on the podcast. It was towards the end of June, like a few days after I recorded that with you. My dad passed away.
Dom, sorry, man.
Yeah, so that was all quite sudden as well. But again, just the effect that had on my mum, because my mum's still alive. Obviously, she's struggling. She's on her own hip operation. But again, this is exactly the same thing. It's horrible. It happens to all of us. There's not too much you can do about it. But it's how you bounce back, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, your dad would not want his passing to have been a huge burden on you. That's not to say that he would have not wanted to be missed, of course. And I'm sure he would have liked the thought of lots of people at his funeral remembering him, because that's just human nature. But he wouldn't want the next year or 2 years of your life to be burdened with sadness, would he?
No, absolutely. And very straight and to the point. And no, I completely agree. It can, he's always going to be there. So same as your dad. And anyone else that passes away, you'll always have those fond memories that nobody can take from you.
That is how people are kept alive, by memory, by making that effort to remember them as often as you can, and by talking about them. That's something that someone taught to me. If you talk about people and remember them in conversation, it's that literally not literally keeps them alive, but it does keep that energy alive. That positivity. Yeah.
No, definitely. Yeah. And it's so important. It needn't be a taboo subject or anything like that, I think.
It's an interesting
point. Right.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a taboo subject. And that's a really, really good point, actually. And I'm not the best in, I can talk to you and to the guys listening, but I'm the worst really for opening up and talking about things.
Well, men are in general, aren't they? I think
most are, yeah. And it's a weakness. and you have to recognise your weaknesses, and I try to overcome that, but it is certainly one of my lackings.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's common for a lot of us guys, isn't it? It seems to be.
Why is that?
Mind you, I think the tide's turning, isn't it? Definitely. I think with the focus on mental health, and mental well-being, I think there's definitely a shift. Obviously, Mike Bridges is doing lots of good work.
Yeah.
There's definitely a shift going, which is good. It's brilliant to see, isn't it?
It's amazing, and that's something, again, you're right, that wasn't in any of our media even a few years ago, and people felt stigmatized to the point that they wouldn't talk about it to anybody, and felt that there was something wrong with them, when in actual fact it's something that happens and can happen to all of us. It happened to me, and I've been there, and it's not something I talk about really, because of the reasons you just said. But mental illness is something that I always used to think, when I was in my younger years before I went through it, I used to think, what someone's just like tried to top themselves, or someone's just gone, what's wrong with them? They just need to give themselves a shake, pull themselves together. I'll never be like that. And but mental illness comes down on you. You have as much choice in that as you do in, it's like saying, I'm never going to catch a cold. That's not going to happen to me. If the right chain of events happen in your life, I think it can happen to anyone. And for me, it's I think it's made me stronger, because now I know the danger signs, and I know what to look out for. And I can also talk to people about it. There's various people that I've been in touch with, even over the last few months. I get messages from. There was one particular guy who people messaged me about, and he was calling out for help on social media and saying that he was going to, no one could change his mind. He was going to end it all. And so I found out this guy's details, and I got in touch with him, and we've been talking. Well, in the early stages, we were talking every day, and now we talk every week. And after a few months, he's come out the other side of it. So you can use your experiences to help other people, so if anyone's listening to this, probably mental health is being affected more than ever right now because of the circumstances. So the best thing I could say is try and talk to people about it. And certainly, if you do try and reach out to people, friends or people in the angling community, or whatever it may be, you will find that there will be someone who go, I know what you're going through. Tell me what you're feeling. And that is like a massive release in itself, because you don't feel like a freak, And
no, absolutely.
If you're suffering with anything like that, then don't feel that you're alone. One, don't feel that you're suffering anything unusual. Two, don't feel that you can't talk about it. Three, because as Dom said, in this climate, this is something people are aware of, and if you can talk to people, it's a big, big step to getting round that. And I could, even just talking to you now, I can think of two other people in the last few months that it's come to my attention that I've been speaking to. So if you hear of a friend or someone that you can get in touch with, whenever it comes up on social media, I try and get in touch with people, and you guys can do that as well. Just listen to people, and it helps a lot.
Brilliant. Well said. We're close to wrapping up, but one thing I did want to touch on, and it's sort of loosely linked to what we're just speaking about. I think in this lockdown period where most of us are at home, obviously you mentioned with River about having doing the homeschooling and then just having that little bit of reward with iPad time.
Yeah.
It can be a really good way for us as well, because it's with Netflix and everything else, it can be very easy to just slob about, not get stuff done. So I think use the time, like you said, use this time really wisely, not only to be productive, but to keep in a good place mentally. So
very much
don't sort of let standards slip, get loads done, maybe get some routine in place, get things you need to do, do the big horrible tasks first, get them done, take 10 minutes you time, go for a walk, your one walk a day, just like to put that in there. But make the most of it, absolutely, but get some sort of structure, because I, as much as I'm not a structured, organised person, but I realise I can fall apart pretty quick when I don't have structure, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. A lot of people thrive on structure. I need some, and I think a level of it helps a lot of people. Certainly, I mean, you mentioned Netflix. I'm just going to put this out there. You know, there's an awful lot of good stuff on there. Best thing on Netflix at the moment for me, Ozark. What about you?
Yes. Oh, yes. Funnily enough, I haven't got Netflix. I've just got Amazon. But we've watched the first 2 series, and Emma messaged me. She's like, "Ozark season 3's out." She's like, "Don't worry, I won't start it without you."
Oh, brilliant! It's for me. It's been for me the greatest thing ever made, bar none, is Breaking Bad, and Ozark is it's its own thing. Ozark, it doesn't plagiarize Breaking Bad, but when you watch Ozark, there are a lot of parallels. Like no matter what he does, it gets worse and worse, and the people around him get sucked deeper and deeper. And we're nearing the end of season 2, absolutely loving it. And from what I've seen, the reviews on season 3, people are really buzzing about it. So, I'm glad. Is there any? So, apart from Ozark, any you could tell the guys to check out?
Well, that's a good. Maybe this can. On that note, I'm just going to scribble that down. We need to have that as a feature, don't we? Along with the rotary letter with
Netflix recommendations, box sets,
I've been watching. So this is on, like I say, on Amazon. I've been watching one called Hand of God, but I've stopped it. It's just a bit too dark and depressing.
Okay,
just can't be doing it. It's that. What's the guy's name? He's been in quite a lot of stuff. He's very. I'll have to check it, but he's got a very recognisable face. He's got grey hair, probably in his 60s, but it started off good and it got quite weird and dark, and I just thought, I don't know what, I just stopped enjoying it.
What is it's not a documentary, it's a
No, it's a series. Right, okay. Yeah, I think it's on season 2 or 3. What other ones have I seen that are good? There's been a couple.
Stranger Things?
I think they were sort of... I started watching that, and I don't know.
Like it.
I'm terrible for... I don't know. I can get into something and then I can go off it just as quick. I don't know if it's just life gets in the way.
Yeah.
I've started again, and it's probably more down to so much bloody choice.
Yeah. Do you know what? Like, so many times I sit down there and I think, right, it's 9 o'clock. I'll just scroll through. Right, I want a film that's about 2 hours because I don't want to go to bed too late. You know, keep the routine blah. But by the time it gets 9:30, I've lost half an hour of my viewing time because there's too much to sift through to decide what you're going to watch. but so I would say the greatest thing ever made, bar none, in my opinion, Breaking Bad. What's your number one?
Oh, I loved Breaking Bad. I really enjoyed Narcos. Have you seen that?
Yes, mate. Phenomenal. Brilliant.
What a guy.
Yeah.
Obviously helping schools. So much cash, you had to bury it in places.
Unbelievable. But the greatest thing about that, unlike Ozark, Breaking Bad at all, is that it is true. You say it's unbelievable, and you watch it, and that was the great thing about that. I'd watch it, and I'd look at my wife and go, this is just unbelievable. And it happened.
Yeah, I love that series.
Yeah, good show.
I don't think what other ones I can think of. I'll have a think. I'll have to start scribbling down as I watch
Game of Thrones, yes or no?
Not watched it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, not watched it.
I enjoyed that.
That's Vikings.
No, not seen that. Heard it's good.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Out of 10?
Yeah, that's worth watching. Probably 8, I'd say.
Good.
But again, it's sort of evolved. So the first few seasons are the best, but I haven't finished it. It sort of almost evolves through generations, if you like, the storyline.
Okay.
That's good. Really well. I'm quite obviously the more I get into photography,
you appreciate
and videography, the more I appreciate
cinematography,
how things are shot, and all the effort that's involved in it. Because, like you said, there's so much choice and there's so much content out there.
Yeah.
It's easy to not appreciate just how much effort goes into a shot.
Absolutely, and I probably don't have quite the same appreciation as you, because I think you're into your photography at a much higher level than I am. But certainly when I watch a film like Joker, that was one of the most mesmerizingly beautiful films that I've ever seen, because every image was so carefully thought about and photographed. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I loved it.
Wow. I mean, as a film, obviously incredible, but the imagery and photography in that was some of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah. Again, it's the same old thing. Like, I'm a plumber by trade, so when I go for a pee, let's say in a pub toilet, you can't turn that off. So you're looking at the pipe work, you're looking at everything. You just can't turn it off. But I'm at the point now where I watch a film and I think, oh, that's clever. I wonder how they've done that shot. And it sort of takes me away from the plot of it. I'm like, oh, that's really good. How have they done that? And then I've missed like a few seconds of it.
Brilliant.
No,
excellent.
We're rapidly approaching the hour mark. But one thing we're doing, that rotary letter style thing that I mentioned. Your question's from Dean Macy, and it's so the one thing. This is money or time aside that you'd want to do in your fishing, or even like a bucket list thing.
Okay. So I was talking to Simon Scott the other day, like one of my best friends, and he had done this trip to Panama, and it had involved flying to Panama City. But first of all, we had to fly from Heathrow to Berlin and then fly from Berlin to Panama. So that in itself pretty arduous. And then when they got there, they stayed in this hostel which slept about 20 people to a room, male and female. And it had a nightclub in the basement and a nightclub on the roof. Then after that, the next day, they had something like a 6-hour journey down jungle tracks in an SUV. And then they had to get on a boat, and they had several hours on a boat until they reached the destination. And when they got there, they went out and fished for sharks and various other species by canoe, right, in the sea. So I said to Simon, so he's told me about, absolutely incredible life event to do. And I said, Simon, if you could go next week and do that again, would you do it? And he went, no. So some bucket lists just need to be ticked off because they're so phenomenal, and they're not necessarily ultimately enjoyable. They're just experiences. But so I think one thing that I have done, which I would love to do again, which would need money and time, would be tarpon fishing out of Florida, but a particular way. So we did it one night. So you the boat drifts on the current alone, and you fish off the back of the transom with a float and a live crab, and the crab's maybe 3 foot under the surface, and you do it at the right time on a full moon and when there's no weather, so it's flat calm, and you can see all the lights of the seafront of Florida, maybe, I don't know what the curvature would be, like 5 or 6 miles away in the distance. So you're out and you're just drifting. So the engine's off. You're drifting completely silently. You're there in a t-shirt. It's pitch black apart from the moon, and you're just holding the rod and reel, and nothing's happening. It's silent. The stars are sparkling, and then your crab gets smashed by the most unstoppable force of nature, and it goes from complete tranquility to all-out war as the whole boat gets pulled about 5 miles by these monstrous serpents. That is proper adrenaline pumping, and I'd like to do that again.
Wow. I think I saw, was it Jeremy Wade that fished for them in the little, what are they called, like the rubber dinghy with flippers?
Oh, I didn't see that one. Right, okay.
And he said you have to be careful because they tend to come flying out of the water and headbutt you. And they've had like, I don't know if they've killed people, but they've knocked people out before.
I bet they have. Yeah, they'd certainly break your nose. Yeah.
Yeah, God, amazing. What sort of size were they that were being caught on that method?
Well, you bring them alongside the boat, and they're, well over £100, £200.
God.
You didn't get. We didn't land a lot actually. I was on a boat with Daryl Peck, and we both lost fish that would tow the boat for 45 minutes, and you'd follow them, and just the most incredible. The thing that's most exciting about it is that the skipper sets the clutch on your reel, and you, as a car painter, we know how to use clutches, and he would set it, and you couldn't pull it off. You couldn't pull line off the reel. That's how tight the clutch was, and you're tempted to back it off a bit because you think no. And I tell you what, when these fish smash into that crab, you cannot stop the clutch. It's spinning like it's an incredible force of nature. It's shocking. And when, like I say, when you juxtapose that moment of insanely ripping line off the tightest clutch you can imagine with the stiffest rod you've ever held being bent through to the butt, and 10 seconds earlier, flat calm, twinkling stars, utter silence, flat just drifting along, waiting, and then bang! It's awesome.
It's awesome. Oh, wow. Amazing. Oh, that sounds brilliant. So obviously, have you got a question that you can pose to our next guest?
Yeah, okay. So obviously we're all anglers and we all love angling, and but what if you couldn't do it, or there wasn't such a thing? What leisure pursuit or activity would you find yourself drawn to? Because we've probably all got we have all got the common denominator of loving the outdoors. So maybe it would be something involving the outdoors. But if there was no fishing, what would you do?
Yeah, brilliant. Right, I've written that down. And the final point, I'm asking everyone to draw a carp in 60 seconds, sketch it, film it, and then I'm going to do like a little competition at the end, just for fun, really.
Yeah.
But also, why don't you do one and get River to do one as well?
Okay, yeah, we'll do.
And then we'll have two entries. Yeah, but obviously try and do it so we can't see your name. So if you're going to put your name on, do it after the picture, because I'm going to do it anonymous.
Okay.
So there's no bias towards it.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you do one and get River to do one as well, and we'll stick those entries in.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Good stuff.
Awesome. Right, that's just over an hour as well, mate. So we'll wrap up there.
Well, that went very, very quickly. Always a pleasure talking to you, Dom.
Yeah, no, enjoyed that, mate. Thank you, and stay safe.
And you, my man. Thanks for having me on, and stay safe, guys. Stay positive, and we'll all be back out doing this in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, Adam.
Cheers, Dom. Bye, mate.